Hey yo, welcome to another stream of Drawing Comics. Um, this is gonna be the Drawing Comics stream where I'm gonna be doing John Buscema's art, learning from it, showing you guys some tips and perspective on comics, how to improve your panels. And I'd like to start out by showing you guys a page from one of my favorite artists, if not the most favorite artist at the moment, Eduardo Risso. This is 100 Bullets. It's such a great comic book all around. The story is excellent. From issue 1 to 100, they're all great. The art is beautiful, as you could see. Such unique panel work, such unique perspective, such unique characters. But just great book, great story. And then we got the cover artist, Dave Johnson. He also does amazing work. They all work so well together. Like Brian Azzarello, Eduardo Risso, Patricia Malvo, and Dave Johnson. They all do such great job on this entire story. And just wanted to show you guys this in this episode, or in this issue rather. It has like some of the best scenes, some of the best camera angles. I'm sure there are other ones. Like it's been a minute since I've read all of the issues all over again, which I am. I really do want to revisit them again. It's just, I'm always so captivated and inspired by the art, the story itself as well. I get really into it, and it's just going into this cool world that is illustrated so well. And just to show you guys how important it is to vary your panel work in terms of like camera angles, right? And like the very first one right here, you know, just this shot right here. It's such a great shot, and there's exaggerated perspective, you know. It's like this angle coming down from here, and you're getting to see like all the stuff that's behind a bar, but really it's like about these guys duking it out. As you guys have read, it's some adult content. There's definitely a lot of adult content here, so I'll just say that. This is my fair warning. Stories are dark. Yeah, each issue has some pretty dark ideas, but it's interesting. It's very cool, and I'm sure the stuff happens, of course, in reality. You know, it's all based on things that do happen outside of our scope of vision. So it touches up on life as well, and all the different struggles and problems and challenges we face morally as well. The choices that we have to make, all that is included, which is why the story is so great. And just the metaphors that are used to describe, like visually and through dialogue, to describe certain scenes or what's about to come. It's so masterfully done. So you got these two grumpy old men taking jabs at each other at a bar, and as you could see, his work isn't like hyper realistic, you know, like doesn't have all the tiny little details, but there are cool things that I really do enjoy about his work, like just that right there, you know. That's so much fun. That's so cool. It adds to like the griminess of it all. Like these little things are so important to bring it all together, you know, just all of that little detail within the glass, the splashing off of the bottle and such, you know, all of these little things add to making this scene so cool. And the same thing could be said here, and I like even like little things like that, just showing you guys ways that you fill up the background. You don't want it to be boring, you don't want it to be flat, and just focus on this dude or these guys, you know, or the main characters or whatnot. You could see like really that this takes up so much of the scene, but despite it being about these two guys taking jabs at each other. So just kind of like, you know, it gives you something fresh to look at. It's not some common angle that you would see. It's not just the front view of like these two guys and just close up of them talking to each other, you know. So that's just one way of making it interesting for the readers to get engaged in the art, not just the story, you know, not just reading the bubble and then moving on to the next one, just quickly looking through. Just take the time and look and appreciate all that. That's somebody's hand that created that. Then moving on to the next panel, this is also masterfully done, right? Because look at that, there isn't that much detail there, and in fact it's kind of cut off towards the bottom, right? There isn't at like every single frame and line and perspective that's there. It's pretty flat, but it's in perspective of the scene. You know, you got this right here. You got like this perspective right there. And you got, you know, this building right here that's kind of turning towards this angle. I'm doing my best here with this limited tool. And then you got this perspective here. So despite this being so simple, it's adding, it's not taking your focus. You know, it's there, it adds to the scene, it adds to the drama. You got these cars back here, also pretty simple. But then you got little details here that make it so much fun. You know, like this stuff that really bring out the scene. You know, all these little things, and they're fun to draw, and they add character to the building. You know, you got like the grimy little part of like the awning here. The liquor sign is kind of tilted to just show this like worn out, crappy area, you know, not really well taken care of. Also notice that not a lot of detail here, right? He didn't draw every single line, and that's just part of the composition. You know, just bringing it all together. You know, he's creating this vibe, he's creating this scene, but with just a few lines, masterfully done. You know, adding these little bit of details to the gate, and this right here. Even this, I think, is important. The shapes, the circular shapes within it, kind of breaks up the lines that you see everywhere on the image, and it adds to it being dynamic. And then you could see even with the bricks here, you didn't draw every single brick, but there's a suggestion, you know, that the rest of them are just like that as well. It's just how it's done as well. It's just the suggestive lines are masterfully done. Then you got like the bottom part of it where he uses, you know, moving on to the next panel, where he uses shadows masterfully, right? Like all that's all black, no detail, but you get an idea that it's like this dim setting. You got flat colors for the stools and the desk, or the table rather. And just by like this alone, you know, the chairs, whoa, that's interesting. The chairs, and having the chairs have this like cool design, that on its own kind of breaks up the solid shapes of the shadows. And this as well. This little detail, dirt right there, that's cool. You know, it also breaks it up. This is like the center focus towards the back, and it also has interesting curves and lines on it. And this is what I mean in terms of like building up your visual library. You want to draw not just faces well, you know, not muscles and all that, but you also want to make the backgrounds interesting in its simple form. You know, would you, if you would have drawn a mirror, would you have cared to actually draw these little things? And there isn't that much detail, it's solid, but it still adds character to something that otherwise would be kind of plain. Adding this little thing right there, that's fun. Makes it more interesting visually, makes it more rich. And notice here as well, things are written down. You know, that's not an important part of the scene. You know, if you're like an average viewer, are you really going to focus on that as much? But it does bring out a vibe. It does bring out this intimate sort of setting, this intimate environment in a sense. And of course, adding this design right here, that's also great. It also breaks up the pattern of like, well, adds a pattern to something otherwise that would be pretty solid in a sense. Same thing over here. So as you could see, like there are these little things, you know, pattern breaking that makes the panel really cool. Very interesting. Like even the stuff in his jacket. It's not drawing every single crevice and every single fold, but just this masterful use of shadows that that just create the scene as well. And then looking at his face right here, it's at a distance, but you could tell he's not happy. You know, he's in that like agitating state. He's like antagonizing the other guy about his wife. So even that's pretty cool, right? Like it's not the focal point. She's kind of the focal point, right? Everything else here, it just follows along with what the previous bubble was talking about in the next panel, and you could see, you know, where the joke is going with that. But yeah, and also pay attention to the face, right? It's not heavy in detail, but these little, these tiny little details, the simplicity of like even the nose, not drawing every single part of the nostril, and the simplicity of the eyes as well. They're not simple. It's very, very masterfully done. Like if you see just drawing how every single line can, and every single tiny detail or curve can change an expression completely, you could see how this is masterfully done, because he's able to portray these feelings and emotions and expressions with not crazy amount of detail there, as well as the hair. You know, if you look at that, even like that part right there, look at the lines there. They're complicated lines. They're not simple forms. They're not just swooping quick gestures. There's more curves to them, and that's fun, right? So it's kind of like balancing out a little bit of both. You got simple lines here, very very flat images, or very flat parts of the image, and they're accompanied by, you know, like more complicated lines like that. And like, as I was mentioning that as well, and also the hand, like that's beautiful. It's so great. All the little parts of it, you know, where it bends, all these lines right there, the curves to them, that adds more realism to it. as well. Just beautiful work. It's excellent. This issue is excellent as well. It's pretty dark. It's terrible stuff that happens to the character. And how that unravels, all of it, it's all great stuff. And every issue that follows and before it as well. I just wanted to bring this up because really this scene right here, well, all of these panels, but that panel is definitely one of my favorites, as well as this one, you know, just the camera angle. And I just wanted to show you guys how important it is in terms of creating and paying attention to the stuff. If you are somebody who's drawing comics, you know, just recognizing how fun you can make your panels be by changing things up, changing the perspective, thinking of interesting angles, you know, that aren't just focused on the characters. And this was just a great example of that, you know, 3 really beautiful panels and 3 very unique ones. They're not the same at all. You know, you got her towards the foreground, them in the background, and even this piece right here further out. They all kind of play an important role, and this as well. Like all these parts combined together. And also notice how you got rectangular shapes, square shapes. Well, rectangular mostly. And then you got some circular shapes. You got that, you got this. You know, you got the coin that she's holding itself. You got the cassettes in the background here. So it's just mixing all that stuff together. You know, all of these elements create masterful panel work. You know, angles, camera angles, varying lines, you know, making all these different lines as well. Shape differences, you're mixing up the shapes. You got circles, you got squares, you got rectangles. All of that creates masterful panel work. So just things to keep in mind, you know, when you are working on stuff like what else can I do to make things more interesting? And it doesn't need to be just this comic, although I highly recommend everybody to read it. It could be other comic books that you like. Just pay attention to them really, and like beyond just the characters themselves, and try to notice these things about them, like we were talking about, like the varying shapes that are in the panel, like what the camera angle is like, and what captivates you about that camera angle. And study it. Take the time to notice all those tiny little bit of details, and you'll see that your own work will improve, and it'll be even more fun for you to work on your stuff, because you're like, oh, maybe I should add more to the background. Let me do a little research and see what else I can find in terms of what I'm drawing. Like if I'm drawing a cabinet, like let me see what kind of cool cabinets are out there and what sort of like little details I could take away from them. It doesn't have to only be from the comic book, but it's just this example shows how, you know, paying attention to all those little things, like I was mentioning, like that and that, and adding that, like all those things make it great, you know, make it more cool and fun. Well, that's enough gushing about 100 Bullets, right? Let's jump into panel work. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm definitely going to be showing more stuff in the future. I'll be showing other panels that I really enjoy, talking about them, getting into them, discussing the artwork and stuff. Like this isn't going to be the only one for sure. But I did want to share it and introduce you guys to this comic book. I wanted to share it with as many people as possible for them to see this beautiful work and story. Yeah, now with that said, let's get back to drawing comics. let's get back to another favorite artist of mine, John Buscema, and his masterful work when it comes to drawing comics. And in the same vein, in a sense, like, I'll show you, if you're just tuning in, if you've never seen these streams before, this is your first stream, this is it right here. This is John Buscema's work. And the same idea here, you know, not hyper realistic stuff, not crazy amount of detail when it comes to coloring either. You know, it's just masterful lines, great composition, angles, you know, especially this one right here. You know, we're talking about figuring out cool ways to tell the story visually. That's a great one. Terms of like breaking up patterns here, right? We got and shapes as well. It's the same idea. You got the circular helmet, right? Or half circle if you want to be exact. And then we got like this part of the helmet that breaks that pattern up right here. From like the squares of the bricks, rectangle shapes. So you got your circles, you got your squares, you got your rectangles, and then you got like these, I'd say it's its own shape. It's something that takes the focus of it. Like, you really pay attention. Oh, it's this dude. They're addressing him, so who's this guy? You know, that's, again, it's the same idea. Breaking up shapes, having them all together, but also varying them. Also, masterful lines as well. You know, under the eye, over the brow, these simple lines right here just add so much character. I love the feather work. That's something that I really enjoy about John Buscema's work, about Jack Kirby's work. I'm not really sure Jack Kirby does as much feathering, but I do remember it being there. I think he had more of like a solid colors, solid shapes, more so than feathering. But I have to look at it again. I haven't actually seen his work recently. I haven't visited his work recently, which I should. But yeah, same ideas, you know, just the complex yet simple forms and shapes that make his work so great. And with his work, it's more so like you saw Eduardo Risso's work, and it's stylized. It's beautiful work still. Definitely, there's detail in the fingers and the hands, as you guys saw. But John Buscema's work is, I think, more anatomically realistic. Like, it gets more of a feel that it's closer to reality, but at the same time, it's not, right? You look at it, and you look at this face, it has a lot of expression, but you're not seeing the tiny little details within the pupils, right? They're kind of solid, but yet it's still such a mature looking face, a sophisticated looking face. Then the hair and the suggestion of how many strands are visible in the highlights. The expressions, the lips, you know, all this, that's also something you would benefit from drawing from real life. You know, you pick up on these things, and some things really sit well more with you. You could be more about lips, or it could be more about nose, or there are certain things that you liked about all those features that you drew when you were looking at a real life model, or drawing from a model, let's say from a photo or something. Yeah, you're like, oh, I like this. You accidentally make that line. You're like, oh, I kind of like that. Let me see if I could draw and have that sort of style of drawing the eye or nose or cheek or mouth and other ones, and see how I like it. You know, just kind of self-discovery from this practice. So yeah, this is it for the newcomers. John Buscema. This is Conan the Barbarian. let's jump into. I want to keep it in Vision. I think it's great for you guys as viewers as well, just to check it out as I'm drawing it. So I'm pretty much done with this panel, I believe. There are a couple little details that I should add just for devoting myself to accuracy and always learning and improving hand-eye coordination. But overall, I'm pretty much done with these panels. I can move on to the next. It's pretty close, but I could see, even just looking at it now, that some angles on these lines aren't right. But that just attests to the idea of how unique each and every artist is. That despite you wanting to draw exactly like them, they still maintain their uniqueness because each and every line is theirs. It's incredibly difficult to mimic them, like angle for angle, detail for detail, thickness of the line to thickness. You know, it might be so close, but that tiny bit of detail is something that just makes them so unique. You know, they created these panels, but they're great to learn from. You know, as I love drawing these things because it's just like reading a book. You know, you're going through the mind of the artist in a sense, in the same way as when you're reading a book, you're reading what they're creating, as if though you were the creator of these things, and you visualize them in your head as if though, you know, you created that in a sense, because you do essentially. You do when you read the text, you visualize the characters like the person wants you to visualize them, for you to get into their head, basically. Take that journey with them, see what that experience is like, what the story is like. And I feel the same way when it comes to this. Like whenever I draw these panels out, it's like going through the journey and being in them, in mind of the artist, and drawing the lines that they're drawing and creating the characters that they're creating. It's just a fun experience. So these panels are pretty much the same size. I'm going to measure this one. Just to remind you guys, there's a trick to making sure it's all parallel. You could either do it from the previous line itself, compare the distance, make sure that the line lines up. The ruler lines up with the line of the frame, and then just follow it down to create it. You could also use the bottom of the frame, right, and make sure that this is lined up with the bottom of the frame. That's, for me right now, it's a little bit challenging because, you know, my head range of motion is limited with the camera in front. But yeah, that's a way to do it for sure as well. Or you could use the page. You know, you can make sure that the bottom of the ruler really lines up perfectly with the straightness of the page. And then from there, make the line straight. There's just several ways of doing it. And it also kind of helps with that idea I was talking about before. Just practicing your ability to recognize space difference between objects. You know, I'm comparing this line and how parallel it is to this line. Just different ways to keep in mind these tools that I'll need to pull out later. So as I mentioned earlier in the previous stream, if you're just tuning in, best habit you can teach yourself is sketching things out lightly. That's what I'm going to do. Also keeping in mind the space relationship between objects. For example, how far away is this text box from the frame? Not too far, so it should be the same case in my drawing. How far is this black bar right here, which is the ceiling, from the top of the frame? Or even from the top of this text box. It just kind of helps you build everything within the frame to make sure that it all fits. Now, the other question is text box. How far out does the text box go? And I'm going to say it's a little less than half the page, or half the panel, rather. Right? Like from here to here, and then from here to here. It's a tiny bit less than half the page. And see how soon space recognition between objects becomes an important tool to pull out. It's almost immediate. So I'm kind of like fleshing out the background. Make sure that it all fits within the panel. Here's an example of a negative space right here. Right, if you're going to draw the speech bubble as you see it, draw this right here instead. You know, draw this shape. And now you already have like the starting point for the speech bubble. To make sure that it fits in right, it's not shifted and then having to shift everything else. Then you could pay attention to like, where does the robe start on this end? So how far away is it from the pillar? Not too far, you could eye that. Then we got the floor right here. How far away is it from the frame? Try to eye that as well. Got the shadow here. Just doing light sketching. Boundaries of everything. Since this is a reference. And like, what about this detail right here? Look at where the tunnel ends and where this begins. So you want to do that same thing for your reference. And this kind of helps to alleviate the whole like looking back and forth, you know, trying to notice, is it drawn exactly the same? Like, it gives you a reference to look back and forth between, rather than looking at the entire image or, you know, the entire pillar. You're like, how is it exactly the same? You could just narrow things down to something smaller. And then once you get that down, you could move on to something else. Like we were talking about, like this shape as opposed to the entire pillar. You could pay attention to that. This is the pitfall to having like a small pad. Can't really draw the details as well as they are on a page, because originally this is drawn on like 14 by 17, I want to say. So you got more space to actually draw little details, which for me is the opposite at the moment. And it's really important too, because like, look at that face. He's angry. He's like serious and it's like brooding. But it's hard to convey that when your pencil isn't even thin enough to do it. But once again, it demonstrates like the masterful placement of lines. You don't see every detail in the eye. They're just simply these like tiny little rectangles for eyes. Can demonstrate this mood. Good use of shadows too. Don't really want to use like the pencil for like filling in shade. That's why you actually see X's. Like if you look at like professional level comic book artists and their like comic book paper before it's like digitalized, they have like these X's there to indicate this is where you fill in the blacks. If it's tough to draw it, imagine this small, that is, imagine what it would be like to making sure to preserve the detail when I'm like coloring this panel. It's still portraying some emotion, it's not exact. But this is part of the challenge that I chose to accept. Drawing tiny. This kind of reminds me of like when I was in 6th grade. I remember there were some kids who had like microscopic font. It was an art in a sense. Like I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is so neat and it's so tiny. Like they were able to fit like paragraphs in a couple of sentences. If even I used to look at it, I was like, oh, that was so cool. But then I noticed how trying to emulate it, I would slow down writing. And by the time I was like done trying to draw that or replicate that, the board would be wiped out. Like bored with all the details about whatever the subject was, and I was like, oh damn it. So I had to like choose between drawing really small like that and seeing what the outcome would be, and having information from my homework. And sometimes I would choose the former. So my homework would suck. Didn't have all the right information. Yeah, typography is absolutely art. Graffiti, that's absolutely art. So it's just kind of in that realm, and I thought it was super cool. I think I might have even asked one of them to like give me their notes or something, because I really liked how the font looked. Not because I actually cared about the notes. forget what the name of the other type of that type of art actually is. Like, there's another artist who pretty much like has photographic memory, and they're able to draw like the entire city from just a quick scope from like a helicopter ride. Like, they'll go up into the sky, they'll like just visualize everything in their mind's eye, I guess, and come back down and draw every part of the city, detail for detail. It's incredible. Like, it's incredible memory. It's a superpower in a sense. Like, just from a glance of the helicopter ride, you could remember every single thing, and they draw it just as microscopically small. I'll bring it up for you guys eventually. It's another thing to look forward to on the stream. I actually ran into some of the people that I saw from, that I remember from 6th grade. Like, I haven't seen them since, but I ran into them, and it's, I don't think that, like, I wonder if it's my memory or people are just like, oh, I don't want to be awkward and pretend like I remember them, so they just pretend like they don't recognize you or something. Or it really is just that I have good memory, but I could always recognize them by their face, even though they're like matured, of course, and it's like 20, 30 years later, and I'm like, hey, I remember you. You went to my elementary school. Like, there's still something about their face, and I guess that's like maybe an artistic side of like paying attention to detail and that sort of thing. Like, that I'm able to be like, I know that face. I remember this kid from 6th grade, It's interesting. They still had like bad kid faces, but there are certain things about people that don't change visually, and you could be like, and you could recognize them. That's what I think. I think everybody kind of recognizes each other. But what do you guys think? Like, I wanted to take a poll, kind of, how many of you can actually remember people that you went to school with in like 6th grade? Like, because I think once you get into like junior high school, it's like they've already kind of took an adult look, and you could remember them. Your memory is still your memory is like more developed. Their look is more developed as well. So over the years, it's pretty much the same. But I think when you're much younger, you look different, especially once you age and a lot of things start to change, either towards the worse or the better. Some people become less recognizable. But yeah, what's your experience like? Do you remember the people you were, or did you ever come across somebody from 6th grade, and what'd you end up doing? Did you say hi? Like, oh, I remember you. We went to 6th grade together, or 5th grade, or whatever. Do you guys do like the double take where you're like, oh wait, something's familiar, but then just keep walking because you don't want to creep the person out or something? I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. I like to talk to people and see how they're doing, and not for comparison, obviously. Like, just, you know, it's something. It's a memory that you're not gonna revisit. You know, you're not gonna go to 6th grade again. So it's just cool to come across people who were part of that memory. And they made up that memory and just say hi. Like, hey, me and you made a memory together. But yeah, unfortunately, because after that period, people become incredibly conditioned to be competitive. It becomes this like ego battle about like, well, what have you done? And that whole toxic garbage. Or when you see that in movies, and then as you grow up, you start to think that's what you do. You know, so it's like one drawback to film adaptation or what people choose to do. Like, they shape their social interaction based on movies that people made. Rather than just shaping their own experience. And ways of dealing with things. Yeah, I'm not a fan of competition or comparison whatsoever. I think it's the most toxic thing, the most parasitic thing people could teach themselves or act like, or whatever else. Like, as I mentioned, I think the way you improve is by challenging yourself, not comparing yourself to others, but challenging yourself, setting yourself up goals to achieve and push for them. And it works in favor of all these toxic companies who make you waste all your money to try to, like, oh, you want to show yourself to be better then? Buy this car that costs $50,000 and that's going to take you 6-7 years or whatever to buy. But then that person is going to be jealous. Isn't that awesome? These awful values that these companies teach people so they can make money. That's what really favors when people buy into that sort of behavior and that sort of mentality of like competition better than all that garbage. It doesn't favor the person at all. It just makes them more miserable and petty and angry over things that they don't need to be. To think this all just came from the conversation about tiny little details and paying attention to them. But I do enjoy talking about that stuff. I mean, I read a lot of Philip K. Dick books too, because all those things kind of come up there as well. So it's probably from like book influence as well. But they do make great points. I can't deny that. Actually, it's funny, you know, I was looking at I mentioned his books in previous streams, and I was listing some of them, and I didn't realize that he also wrote Minority Report. Like, I used Minority Report as an example as well. But yeah, you know, Electric Dreams, the show that's on Amazon Prime, that's all his short stories that they're interpreting. Great show. If you guys haven't seen it, check that out. Electric Dreams on Amazon Prime. And then I also mentioned Androids Dream Electric Sheep, which is what Blade Runner is based on. It is Blade Runner. Like, the book is basically Blade Runner. It's just, it was turned into a movie and it was called Blade Runner. But the book is fun too. It's different. It's there are more characters there, whereas in a movie they kind of like either took them out or combined them together. And there's certain things that aren't in the movie that are in the book, which I was like, why would you take that out? That's so crucial to, you know, some of the points that he's making or the ideas that he's putting out there. So it's cool to read it. I would say if you like Blade Runner. It's a short book. It's not too long. Yeah, it's cool to read it because you get to hear other perspectives on it. Or interpretation, rather, is different. Minority Report is also great. If you guys haven't seen it, it didn't get that much press, or I guess like publicity and stuff. And it's such a good movie. Tom Cruise is in it, and he's doing his like Mission Impossible moves there. But the story is great. I love the story. And how it's made is also pretty wonderful. Like the movie, the graphics, the cinematography. And I do like Tom Cruise's movies. Like, I did enjoy The Color of Money. I thought that was a great movie. Risky Business was fun as well. The Firm, which is another book adaptation. That was also a really good movie. I didn't read the book, but it was a good movie. I imagine the book is pretty good as well. I find the books are always better. The only book I refuse to read because I love the movie so much is, and this is probably a common one, but I think Fight Club was great. It's a cult classic, man. A movie. And I really love David Fincher's movies as well. He's a great director. He did Seven. He did The Game, which is another really good movie with Michael Douglas. Great cinematography. His cinematography is awesome. Like, I love his cinematography. But yeah, that book I refuse to read. I'm not going to read that. I think that I want that movie to stay as good as it always is. Like, I watched it not too long ago, just revisited it, and I was like, man, it's still so good. Everything about it. The sense of humor, the message behind it, the cinematography, the acting. I have to see what, like, he did the Zodiac, and maybe I have to watch it again, but when I did see it in theaters, I was like, I don't know, man. It was okay. But maybe I have to rewatch it again and see how I feel about it. Maybe I'll like it more. Like, I saw Son of Sam, and I thought that was a better adaptation about some similar instance. It's not too bad. It came out alright. There are certain things that just not putting in the detail because it just can't. Oh wow, look at the time, guys. Past it. And with this last stroke, this last part of the panel, I will have to say goodbye for now. I will be back at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be working on a personal project. You guys will see that as well. And then at 9 o'clock, I'm going to be coloring comics, where I'll come back to John Buscema's work, and I'm going to be watercoloring the panels to practice watercolor, give you guys some perspective on it, share my ways, and for you guys to continue to see his amazing work. If you guys like this content, subscribe, hit the like button, check out the social medias, and stick around. I'm going to make some announcements soon as well to get you guys more involved as well into the stream anytime during the future. Different ways you guys can do that. So yeah, stick around. I hope I'll see you at 8 p.m. See you soon.